In today's video, we're diving into the 5 most disturbing incidents ever caught on CCTV. From a gym regular starting a squat just as the building suddenly began to shake, to a man breaking into the wrong house, getting instant payback in the most unexpected way possible. It was March 14, 2016, inside a small second-floor fitness gym in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the evening crowd had already begun to thin. Only a handful of members remained scattered across the free weight area beneath rows of fluorescent lights. The hallway near the front desk led directly to a narrow stairwell that served as the building's main exit. Caleb Turner was a 22-year-old community college student who worked part-time at a hardware store nearby. Friends described him as disciplined about his workouts and stubborn about sticking to his routine. He rarely skipped a training day. That Monday evening had been no exception. After finishing a late shift unloading freight at the store, Caleb drove straight to the gym to complete his usual workout. Monday was always his back and legs day, and he had planned to finish the night with heavy squats before heading home. Security footage later showed Caleb entering the gym shortly after 7 p.m. and heading directly toward the squat rack positioned along the back wall. A barbell rested on the rack hooks, loaded to 315 pounds. 2 other members were lifting nearby, while another walked slowly on a treadmill near the front desk. Caleb ducked beneath the bar and settled the weight across the back of his shoulders before stepping away from the rack. The plates rattled softly as he adjusted his stance and began lowering into his first repetition. Earlier that afternoon, several residents across Tulsa had reported feeling a brief tremor that rattled windows and furniture for a few seconds. Local stations mentioned the possibility of minor aftershocks, but by evening, most people had returned to their normal routines. Inside the gym, no one appeared to be thinking about the earlier shaking. As he lifted, the building suddenly began to shake. The squat rack rattled against the wall, and the metal plates on the bar clinked together while a few dumbbells shifted on the racks nearby. Several members stopped their workouts and looked around as the shaking continued. Within seconds, people began moving toward the hallway that led to the exit stairs. Caleb stepped forward and quickly set the barbell back onto the rack with a loud clang. Almost immediately after releasing the weight, he grabbed his right thigh. The heavy lift had triggered a severe cramp in Caleb's leg. He bent down and grabbed his thigh as the muscle tightened painfully while other members rushed toward the exit. At first, he couldn't stand, so he lowered himself to the floor and began crawling toward the hallway that led to the stairs. After several feet, the cramp eased just enough for him to try standing again. Caleb pushed himself up and began limping toward the stairwell, using the wall to steady himself as he moved forward. But after only a few steps, the cramp seized his leg again. His knee suddenly gave out, and he lost his balance at the top of the stairs. Caleb fell forward into the stairwell and tumbled down the concrete stairs. People outside later reported hearing someone fall down the staircase during the evacuation. When several members returned moments later, they found Caleb lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs. Emergency responders arrived shortly afterward and transported him to a nearby hospital, where imaging confirmed severe cervical spine trauma and multiple head injuries consistent with a fall down a flight of stairs. Despite emergency treatment, Caleb Turner was pronounced dead later that evening. Authorities later confirmed that Caleb's fatal injuries were caused by the fall down the stairwell during the evacuation. The tremor that evening was later identified as a minor regional earthquake that caused brief shaking across parts of the city. Following the incident, the gym reviewed its emergency evacuation procedures and added updated safety guidance for members during earthquakes. But tragedies caught on camera don't always happen in crowded places or public buildings. Sometimes, the most violent confrontations unfold inside the one place people believe they're safest, their own home. It was July 3, 2018, at a single-story home in Mesa, Arizona. The quiet residential street had already settled for the night, with only a few porch lights glowing along the block. Inside the house, several security cameras quietly monitored the living room and hallway as part of the homeowner's surveillance system. The home belonged to 41-year-old Daniel Harper, a local contractor who lived alone. Friends described him as careful about home security and protective of his property. Over time, he had installed reinforced door locks, outdoor motion lights, and multiple cameras inside the house. He also kept 2 large guard dogs that usually rested near the living room and reacted quickly to unfamiliar movement. That evening, Harper returned home from work shortly after sunset. After feeding the dogs and locking the doors, he went to the bathroom to shower before settling in for the night. The house remained quiet while the security cameras continued recording automatically. At approximately 9:05 p.m., an unidentified man approached the rear door of the house. According to later police reports, the man forced the door open and stepped inside, apparently believing the home was empty. The intruder moved slowly through the hallway toward the living room. Security footage later captured the moment the dogs first reacted. Both animals suddenly lifted their heads and turned toward the hallway as the man stepped into view. Within seconds, they rushed across the room. The intruder immediately tried to retreat, raising his arms as the dogs lunged toward him. Loud barking filled the room as the animals grabbed onto his clothing and arms. Furniture shifted across the floor as the man stumbled backward while trying to push the dogs away. The man tried to move toward the hallway, likely searching for a way back outside. But each time he stepped in that direction, the dogs lunged again and forced him back into the center of the living room. The struggle quickly turned chaotic. A coffee table tipped over as the intruder stumbled across the floor while trying to push the dogs away. One dog grabbed onto his sleeve while the other kept lunging toward him, blocking any path toward the exit. Meanwhile, Harper heard the barking from the bathroom. At first, he assumed the dogs were reacting to something outside, but when the noise grew louder and he heard furniture crashing in the living room, he quickly stepped out and looked down the hallway. From there, he saw the intruder struggling with the dogs. Harper immediately grabbed a baseball bat he kept near the hallway closet and moved toward the living room. Keeping his distance, he swung the bat toward the floor and nearby furniture, trying to drive the intruder away from the dogs. The commotion forced the man backward while the dogs continued lunging around him. Harper then moved toward the nearest door leading to a storage room near the hallway. As the intruder tried to retreat, the dogs pushed him toward that doorway. Harper quickly shut the door once the man stumbled inside, trapping him in the room before calling emergency services. Police arrived within minutes and secured the house, while officers restrained the dogs and detained the intruder. Paramedics treated the man at the scene before transporting him to a nearby hospital. Despite treatment, he died later that evening. Authorities later confirmed the cause of death was severe blood loss from multiple bite wounds sustained during the attack. Investigators determined the man had forced entry through the rear door before encountering the homeowner's guard dogs inside the living room. After the incident, the homeowner reinforced the rear entrance and upgraded parts of the home's security system. That home surveillance system captured every second of the confrontation, turning a routine burglary into a deadly encounter. But sometimes the camera records something even more unsettling, when an ordinary maintenance task suddenly turns into a fatal mechanical accident. It was July 17, 2016, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The temperature had already climbed into the low 90s by mid-morning, and the humidity made the air feel heavy and still. Outside a small gas station on the edge of town, an automated ice vending kiosk stood beneath a metal awning, its compressor humming steadily in the heat. The machine was a common sight at convenience stops across the South, dispensing bagged ice into a chute from a large hopper mounted above the service opening. Inside the hopper, a rotating auger slowly turned through a mass of loose ice, pushing it downward toward the dispenser mechanism below. Tildy Scrake was 51 years old and worked mornings stocking drinks and supplies at the convenience store attached to the station. She had been with the company for nearly 6 years and was known among co-workers as dependable and willing to handle tasks others avoided. Her routine involved restocking coolers, rotating inventory, and occasionally addressing customer complaints about malfunctioning equipment in the lot. Coworkers described her as quiet but efficient, someone who preferred to solve problems herself rather than wait for a service technician. Her shift that day had been routine until a customer came inside just after 10:30 and mentioned the ice machine outside was jammed. The dispenser had stopped dropping bagged ice into the chute, and the digital display on the front panel showed no error code. Tildy grabbed a plastic scoop from behind the counter and walked out into the parking lot. Surveillance footage from the station's exterior camera captured her approaching the kiosk at 10:36 a.m., unlocking the service hatch above the dispensing chute with a key from her belt and pulling it open. The hatch was positioned roughly 4 feet above ground level and opened outward on hinges, exposing the interior chute and the base of the hopper above it. The design of the machine required anyone servicing it to reach into the opening above the chute, while the internal auger mechanism remained active inside the hopper above. Compacted ice had formed a blockage inside the unit, preventing fresh product from dropping into the dispenser below. Tildy leaned forward and extended her right arm into the opening, using the scoop to break apart the packed ice wedged against the auger blades. The footage shows her upper body angled into the hatch as she worked to clear the obstruction, her left hand braced against the exterior panel for balance. For several seconds, nothing moved. She adjusted her position slightly, leaning in farther to reach the compacted mass. Then, the blockage gave way. As the jam suddenly broke loose, the rotating auger above began pulling ice downward again. The movement caught the plastic scoop and twisted it sharply, dragging it toward the auger housing. Before she could release it, the handle jerked violently in her grip, pulling her right arm deeper into the hopper opening. The force pulled her forward against the metal service frame, pinning her upper body against the edge of the hatch while the auger continued rotating inside the hopper. Her neck was forced against the steel frame at an extreme angle as the mechanism continued to draw her arm inward, compressing her throat and cervical spine against the rigid metal edge. A customer pulling into the parking lot noticed her legs near the base of the kiosk and initially assumed she was performing routine maintenance. It was only when he saw her feet moving in an irregular pattern that he realized something was wrong. He ran toward the machine and shouted toward the store entrance. 2 employees came outside, one of them recognizing Tildy's uniform pants. They shut off the power to the unit and began pulling handfuls of ice from the chute, trying to reach her. One of them called emergency services, while the other continued clearing the opening, scooping ice onto the pavement as quickly as possible. Responders arrived within minutes, but extraction required additional time due to the confined opening and the position of the auger assembly inside the hopper. By the time they pulled her from the machine, she showed no signs of life. Investigators later determined the cause of death to be traumatic neck compression against the metal service frame, while her arm remained trapped by the rotating auger mechanism. Authorities noted that the auger had continued running while she worked inside the hatch, and there had been no automatic shutoff mechanism tied to the service door. The machine's operator later installed a safety switch that would stop the auger whenever the hatch was opened. We've got more disturbing CCTV tragedies coming up, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how ordinary moments caught on camera can turn even deadlier in seconds. It was October 29th, 2017, inside a small basement nightclub in Newark, New Jersey, where a crowded Saturday night was just beginning. Lorna Vitch was 29 years old and had been working as a bartender at the nightclub for nearly 3 years. She usually arrived early before the weekend crowds, setting up bottles, glassware, and the bar station before the music started, and customers filled the room. Friends described her as dependable and reserved, someone who preferred quiet get-togethers with close friends rather than the loud nightlife environment she worked in every weekend. She had taken the job after moving to the Newark area from a smaller town upstate, attracted by the steady income and flexible hours that allowed her to spend her daytime hours pursuing photography. The venue itself sat below street level, accessible by a single staircase at the front entrance. Inside, low ceilings and exposed brick walls gave the space a distinct atmosphere that regular patrons enjoyed, though the layout leading toward the back of the building. The basement structure had been converted from an old storage facility years earlier, and the modifications left certain areas feeling cramped even during moderate attendance. That evening, roughly 90 people filled the space for a local music event. The rear hallway, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass shoulder to shoulder, connected the main floor to a steel emergency exit that opened into an alley behind the building. Earlier in the night, staff had secured that door from the inside using a chain and padlock, a practice intended to prevent unauthorized entry from the alley. CCTV footage from 11:42 p.m. shows Lorna standing near the hallway entrance, speaking briefly with 2 co-workers between drink orders. The lighting was dim, and the camera angle captured only partial views of the crowd near the bar. She appeared calm, wiping down the counter between serving customers who clustered around the narrow bar top. At 11:48 p.m., smoke began rising from the stage area where lighting cables had overheated due to an electrical short. The smoke began spreading across the low ceiling, and within moments, people near the stage started moving toward the rear hallway. The footage shows the crowd shifting abruptly, bodies converging on the narrow corridor in an unorganized surge. Lorna reached the exit door first and gripped the handle, pulling hard. The door did not move. She tried again, bracing her feet against the floor, but the chain held firm on the other side. Behind her, more people entered the hallway, unaware the exit was blocked. The corridor measured roughly 18 feet in length and just under 4 feet wide, leaving almost no room for maneuvering once bodies began filling the space. The press of bodies increased. Several individuals stumbled as others pushed from behind, creating a compacting effect in the confined space. Lorna was forced chest first against the steel doorframe, her arms pinned at awkward angles. The combined weight of multiple people bore down on her back and shoulders, trapping her against the unyielding metal edge. The pressure continued building as more individuals piled into the corridor, unable to stop or reverse direction. Her chest was compressed so tightly that she could no longer expand her lungs to breathe. The sustained pressure from the crowd prevented her chest from rising, gradually cutting off her ability to draw air. The camera positioned at the hallway entrance recorded the mass of bodies, but could not capture individual movements in the compressed crowd. Roughly 2 minutes after the initial surge, a staff member reached the door from the inside and unlocked the chain. The door swung outward suddenly, and several people tumbled into the alley, their momentum carrying them forward onto the pavement. Lorna fell last, collapsing face down just outside the threshold. Emergency responders arrived within minutes and found her unresponsive. Despite attempts at resuscitation, she was pronounced dead shortly after. The official cause of death was determined to be compressive asphyxia caused by sustained crowd pressure. Investigators later stated that the tightly packed crowd created enough sustained pressure to prevent those trapped at the front from expanding their lungs. Local authorities later cited the venue operator for securing an emergency exit during active operation. When people are packed closely together, it only takes one small movement for everything to go wrong. On a crowded train platform in Louisiana, that moment came without warning. It was February 9th, 2015, during the morning commute in downtown Chicago. Earlier, snowfall had left the commuter rail platforms slick, and a heavy rush-hour crowd packed the narrow waiting area behind the yellow safety line. More than 150 passengers stood shoulder to shoulder as they waited for the inbound train to arrive. Braden Gray, 24, had just finished another overnight shift stocking shelves at a large retail store on the city's west side. He worked alone most nights, unloading freight and organizing inventory until the early morning hours. The job paid enough to cover rent in a shared apartment 3 stops down the line, and the schedule allowed him to avoid the worst of the crowds. He was quiet by nature and rarely spoke to anyone during his commute home. That morning, he wore a dark jacket and carried a black backpack slung over one shoulder as he stood near the platform edge, just behind the yellow line. His shift had run longer than usual, and fatigue showed in the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Security footage captured the scene in grainy black and white. At 7:12 a.m., the platform was packed tightly with commuters preparing for the inbound train. Braden stood just behind the yellow safety line near the platform edge, hemmed in by travelers on all sides. The train's headlights became visible in the distance, cutting through the dim morning light as it approached the station. Passengers began shifting their weight forward, adjusting bags and positioning themselves to board quickly. The movement was gradual at first, a subtle press of bodies inching closer to the track. The sound of the approaching train grew louder, a low rumble that vibrated through the platform beneath their feet. Then, a commuter standing several feet behind Braden lost footing on the damp concrete. The slip was brief, barely noticeable, but the person's forward momentum transferred into the crowd. The ripple effect moved through the tightly packed group in less than 2 seconds. Braden was shoved across the yellow line as the train entered the station at approximately 20 miles per hour. The front of the lead car struck him as the train entered the station, knocking him off balance. He disappeared beneath the train before the operator could react. The entire sequence unfolded in under 5 seconds. The emergency brake engaged immediately, metal grinding against metal as the train fought to slow its momentum. It came to a full stop several car lengths down the platform. Passengers near the front began shouting, pointing toward the tracks. Transit staff arrived within moments and cordoned off the area, directing the crowd back toward the stairwell. Emergency personnel descended onto the tracks minutes later, but the scene left no room for uncertainty. The medical examiner later confirmed that Braden sustained massive blunt force trauma from the train wheels, with injuries consistent with immediate fatality. Investigators reviewed the security footage frame by frame over the following days. They determined that the initial slip had occurred beyond the yellow safety line, but the force of the crowd surge had carried multiple passengers forward in a compressed wave. No criminal charges were filed. Transit officials issued a formal report citing platform congestion and weather-related surface conditions as contributing factors. Within 6 months, additional warning strips and platform markings were installed along sections of the platform edge where commuter density was highest during peak hours. The modifications included expanded tactile safety strips and clearer painted warning zones designed to help prevent similar incidents. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.